Welcome to the deep dive.
Oh,
Today, we're taking a closer look at a situation in Kenya. It touches on leadership, investigations, accountability, too.
that's right. And we've got a specific source to unpack an excerpt from a YouTube transcript. It gives one particular perspective on events.
Exactly. So our mission today is to really get into this source, pull out the main points, and sort of figure out what this specific account tells you, the listener, about how this whole thing is being discussed.
Yeah, we're focusing on the discussion as presented in this source, not making judgments on the events themselves. It's about the language, the framing, especially concerning the Director of Criminal Investigations.
Okay, let's dig in then. So the core situation this source talks about involves the DIG, the Director of Criminal Investigations, Eliud Lagat. And it's specifically about his position related to the death of Mr. Albert Ojwang. The source basically frames a key question. Should the DIG resign?
And what's interesting right off the bat is that the speaker in this transcript, who seems to be a cabinet secretary, so a high-level official, they don't just give a yes or no.
Right. No direct answer.
Instead, they talk about the investigation itself first. Give some context.
Yeah, the source makes it clear that the investigation into Mr. Ojwang's death is actually ongoing. That's happening now.
And importantly, it says it's being handled by IPOA.
IPOA, the Independent Policing Oversight Authority.
Exactly. So, there's an official independent process underway, separate from this resignation question, at least procedurally.
Okay. And the source mentions how the speaker views the DIA.
Yes, they describe Lagat as a seasoned police officer. That's the quote. Someone who understands investigations.
Okay. So maybe implying he gets the seriousness of it all, the process.
Perhaps. It certainly underscores his experience. Now, here's where the source gets to the kind of the central tension. It frames the issue not just as, was the dig involved, but specifically whether his current conduct or act or position, that's the phrasing, whether that might affect that investigation, the IPOA one, or, crucially, lead to interference.
So the focus shifts. It's about the impact of him staying in his job on the investigation. Is that what the source suggests?
That's precisely how the speaker frames it. And this framing directly shapes their position on the resignation decision.
How so?
Well, the speaker says very clearly they would not make that call for the DG.
Oh, okay. So it's not their decision to make.
According to this account, no. The responsibility is put squarely on the DG himself. He's the one who needs to assess his own involvement and his position, specifically in relation to the ongoing IPOA probe. Vis-a-vis the investigations is the term used.
Right. So it's presented as an internal assessment by the person involved. Yeah, the timing. The source talks about timing too, doesn't it?
It does, very specifically. This potential decision point when this bridge will be crossed, as they put it. It's described as being when the threshold of the investigations where it is reached. So some future point.
A threshold? That sounds a bit vague.
It is somewhat undefined in the excerpt, yes. But it's tied to the progress of the investigation. And then at that point, the question becomes whether or not the DIG himself sees that his position is going to interfere with that investigation.
So it's conditional. It depends on reaching this threshold and the DIG's own assessment of potential interference at that future time.
Exactly. That phrase, "we will cross the bridge when we reach there," really emphasizes this conditional, future-oriented perspective presented by the speaker. The decision isn't for now.
Okay, so let's try to summarize what we've pulled from this specific source. We have an ongoing IPOA investigation into Mr. Ojwang's death.
Correct.
There are questions about DIG Lagat's role or position.
Yes.
And this particular account frames any potential decision about his resignation as something for the DIG himself to decide.
Based on his own assessment.
Of whether his position might interfere with the investigation.
Right.
But only when the investigation hits some kind of threshold.
That's the process articulated in this source. It's a public description of a very specific conditional approach to leadership accountability when there's an ongoing investigation. The assessment, the timing, the criteria, potential interference, it's all linked. And according to the speaker, placed with the individual leader.
So turning to you, the listener, what does hearing this particular account from the source suggest about how accountability, timing, and leadership are being discussed in this specific context.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? This source highlights a way of talking about it where a leader's decision hinges on their own assessment of potential interference at some future point. It really makes you think, what does this specific framing, placing the judgment criteria and the timing with the leader themselves, imply about, say, the dynamics between official processes, personal judgment, and maybe public expectations? It's one distinct articulation of how things might proceed. Something to consider.